Hey, buddy. Go to gallery view. Very good. Not right now. Everybody have a good weekend?
Sure.
Yeah. Anybody do anything interesting? Didn't do anything. At
Oh, my
home.
grandparents.
Oh, you did? How are they doing?
They're doing good.
Yeah. Do they
I just
have?
went to get eggs.
Yeah, I understand. You got eggs from them?
Yeah, they have chickens, so.
Do they have like the cage-free, all that kind of stuff, or is it just?
They just have chickens in a pen, so I guess it's cage-free.
Sure. My sister used to have chickens. I don't think she does anymore. So we used to get eggs from her. She had one that would give like blue eggs.
Yeah, sometimes
We have
my grandpa gets chickens that give weird colored eggs, but once he gets them on the regular feed, they stop doing that.
chickens.
Oh, very nice.
Plenty of chickens.
It's cool whenever they are colored blue, because then it's like, oh, it's an Easter egg. Go hide this somewhere.
Oh.
Sorry, just looking around at the wildlife in my yard. Anyways, all right, it's 11 o'clock, so we can go ahead and start talking. You guys do some research. I haven't looked at the documents yet, so you guys know roughly what we're talking about today. We're talking about the largest military campaign in all of World War II and causing the most deaths in general. And then we're also going to talk about the Holocaust today and all that entailed, and go over a few things that you probably didn't really know or didn't know exactly how deep it went. But that's roughly where we're going to be today. The first thing was Operation Barbarossa, and that was Hitler basically carrying out his master plan. We were talking about the Nazi-Soviet pact. It's like, we won't attack each other. Anybody remember how long that was for? How long they promised not to attack each other for?
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. We're going to give it 10 years. Hitler made it 2 years. He really held back, really doing his best to say nothing. And but then he got tired. And really what it boiled down to was Hitler was very successful with blitzkrieg through Europe. He was able to capture Poland rather quickly. In fact, it was about basically a week. Within a week, he had full control of Poland. And then after that, he marched into a few other countries, but really France is the next major target. He was able to capture France within, less than a month. And he started in on England. And there's a lot of fascinating stuff that actually happens in World War II around that point. But Hitler thought, you know what, it'll be about 2 months, and then I will completely conquer England. I will march in, I will take over their government, and then I'm going to turn all of my attention to Russia, to the Soviet Union, and I will crush Stalin. What always amazes me is the amount of hatred Stalin and Hitler had for each other, and the fact that they actually signed a pact to not attack one another. I don't know how they got along for that point to make that happen. They hated each other so desperately. And so what ended up happening is Hitler got stalled in Europe. I'm not in Europe, in England. And he was unable to get them to capitulate, to give up. It would have been impossible for him to send a landing force over and actually conquer them. So he decided on a bombing campaign. And so I think it lasted over 9 months, but for the first 3 or 4 months, he has this bombing campaign, and he is sure that they're going to give up. But this is the time period whenever you see Churchill really begin to shine, and he puts out there the idea of, keep calm and carry on. And actually, there's a really cool character. He's a spy. His name is Agent Zigzag, and he was basically a thief. And before the Germans began capturing some of the outlying islands of Britain, he was caught trying to break into a safe, and he was put into prison. And this was on the Isle of Jersey. And the Germans come in and they capture the island. And basically, while he's in prison, this guy finds out that he has a daughter back in England. He really wants to see her. He wants to get back home. And so he basically tells the Germans, I hate the English. I'll do anything for you. Make me a spy, send me back, and I'll do whatever. And they buy it. So they train him under literally the greatest German spy master, and they teach him all the tricks of the trade. And they said, okay, we're going to put you in London, and your job is to do whatever we tell you to. And his initial job was to tell them how successful the London bombings were going. And so they drop him off, and immediately as he lands, he gets his equipment, parachutes in just outside of London. He walks to the nearest house, sits down, and knocks on the door. They let him in. He sits down. He says, okay, so I need you to call MI6 and tell them that I'm a German spy, and I would like to basically turncoat and become a defector and spy for the British instead. And so they bring him in to MI6 headquarters, and they grill him, and, well, he's genuine. He said he just had one condition. I want to be able to see my daughter. So being true spycraft and everything, he doesn't see his daughter for like 2 years. But, they're just trying to make sure he's actually on their side. Throughout this whole campaign, every time that the Germans successfully hit London, he would send back to them that they hit a small patch of farmland outside of London, and they were unsuccessful. And every time that they hit the farmland, he would wire back to them that they hit, a direct hit. They hit some very important areas there in London. And the Germans believed him because the English newspapers would run the exact same story. And they would take pictures and photos that made it look like the city was bombed whenever they hit the countryside. And then they took pictures and photos that looked like the farmland was bombed whenever the city was actually hit. And so the British were very adept at holding them off. In fact, at one point, there was a plane that the British made that was called the Mosquito. Now, the title was given affectionately because mosquitoes are really annoying, and the Germans hated this plane. And it's very unique because it was made entirely out of wood. So what that did is it made the plane able to fly further than any other plane, and extremely fast, because they put a regular jet engine on this wooden plane, and the thing could actually reach all the way into German-held territory, but the German planes weren't fast enough to catch it. So they were able to do bombing runs and everything. And there was one factory that made it, and the Germans tasked him with blowing it up. So what the British intelligence community did is they hired a magician to make the factory look like it had been blown up. And whenever the Germans flew over to check it out, it looked like the factory was defunct, unable to be used. And so the Germans were happy, and yet mosquitoes kept being produced. And the Germans just basically believed that there was another factory that they didn't know about somewhere else. And so this guy was absolutely instrumental in keeping Hitler involved in bombing England and not being able to do anything. And the problem with Hitler is he becomes very upset, and he becomes anxious. That person who's got something to do and they're looking at their watch constantly, and they're like, they want to be doing something else at this point. That's Hitler. He's constantly checking, and finally he gets fed up, essentially. And he says, all right, we're going to do everyone's favorite thing. We're going to open a two-front war. If history tells us anything, a two-front war is a terrible idea. And so he heads off to the east, and literally it's the largest military operation in all of World War II. And you're going to end up seeing 26.8 million Soviets die throughout this entire campaign from 1941 to 1944. I believe only 8.3 million of those were actually soldiers. And so the Germans came in, and true to Nazi form, they demonized the Soviet people. Anyone who had a Slavic background was demonized and told that they were subhuman and that they deserved to be killed. In fact, there were multiple commands that Hitler gave that if for example, one was called the Commissar Order. If you captured a commissar, and now this is a person who is in the Russian government or the Soviet government, and they're serving in the military. If you capture a commissar, you don't give them a trial, you don't do anything, you shoot them on the spot. That breaks so many international laws, like not even funny. There's tons of laws that are being broken right here, and he doesn't care. There's so many orders that go out. I believe over 1 million of the Jews that were killed during the Holocaust were in the Soviet territories. And one of the things that they specifically said is that the Soviets are communist and therefore not worth keeping alive. And so what they did, rather than diverting all of the food from the main German army, what they did is as they marched through Eastern Europe, they took food from the people. And the Germans called it the hunger plan. Now, if we know anything about the Soviets up to this point, we know anything about Stalin, he's already starved his people enough. But the Germans are going to come along and also starve the people. And as a result, I'm trying to remember the numbers correctly, within the first year, it was like 4.3 million. It's over 4 million people starved to death in the Soviet-held territories, including Russia, and I believe Latvia is included in there, Bulgaria is included in there, and so they were taking the food from the peasants and starving everyone else. Now, if the Soviets or if the Soviet-controlled areas had people that would help the Germans, they would allow them to eat. But everyone else, if you didn't help them, you would be killed. And the amount of atrocities that were committed between the beginning of Operation Barbarossa all the way to the end is going to have far-reaching consequences going into the Cold War. I'm talking like beyond World War II. We're talking going into the Cold War. The consequences are extreme and will go for years and years. I mean, because they were dehumanized, the idea of mass rapings, perfectly acceptable. It didn't matter. Just you can do whatever you want because they're not good people. And if it was a Jewish woman, sure, you can rape her as long as you kill her whenever you're done. And that was perfectly acceptable. You guys do whatever you want to do. If you want to steal homes, if you want to steal property, if you want to take whatever you find on the way, do it, because these are communists and we are going to kill them. And I'm trying to remember the exact wording, but at one point Hitler literally said that this was a battle of extermination, essentially. Like his goal was to completely exterminate as many Soviets as possible. Like you want to talk about a genocide. This is the language that was used as they were going into the Soviet Union. And so this is what the German soldiers were told. This is what they were tasked with. And they, well, more than happy to carry it out, apparently, as so many people were killed as a result of this. And the German blitzkrieg was very successful in Europe, at least as long as it was on land. When it got to England, it stalled, but that's for completely different reasons. And it was actually very successful in the Soviet Union as well, until winter came. basically the numbers are staggering. In 1941, the Germans captured almost 5 million Soviet soldiers. Now, whenever you think about that, that was a huge part of their army. By the time they got to Moscow, whenever the battle came down to Moscow, Stalin only had 500,000 troops at his disposal. Like, that's it. That's all he had left. That's nothing, because the Germans had well over 3 million troops. 3,500,000, you're going to be overwhelmed and rather quickly. In the first wave of the Battle of Moscow, Hitler's troops captured 80% of Stalin's remaining army. The numbers basically speak to the fact that he had somewhere in the neighborhood of 80,000 soldiers, and only 10,000 of those were trained. The other 70,000 were reserves who weren't ready at all. But then, and if you ever want to see like an example of history, you know, God working through history and making certain things happen, then a lot of things begin to go wrong. One of the things that went against the German army is that while they were stealing food, the Soviets began to catch on that they were basically feeding themselves off of everyone's else's food. And so they started what's known as a scorched earth policy. Has anyone ever at least heard of that before?
Yeah.
All right. So a scorched earth policy, very simply put, is this. If the enemy is coming, you're going to burn everything of use. So if it's a building that might house grain, if it's anything that would hold like liquids or anything like that, burn it and run away. Save yourself, but burn anything that they could use to better their army. So for the last, I think it was like 100 to 150 kilometers going into Moscow, the peasants were practicing the scorched earth policy, and they were burning everything of use. And so as they were marching in, they had no food, their supply line was poor. And what really, you know, put the nail in the coffin on this battle of Moscow is snow began to fall, and then rain began to fall, and then snow began to fall, and then rain began to fall. And I know that I doubt most of you have ever lived somewhere where that kind of weather has happened. A very special mud is created whenever you have a mixture of snow one day, rain the next day, snow. It almost becomes like this cakey mixture, and it is very hard to move vehicles anywhere in mud. Even the German tank treads were too narrow. They weren't this narrow, but they were too narrow to actually navigate this mud very well. And most Soviet roads were not paved. They were still dirt roads. And so the German military had to basically stop for a very long period of time. I believe that they were paused for about 2 months before they could even move forward in their campaign. What this did is it allowed Stalin time to reorganize his army and bring the entire army that had been stationed in Serbia to stop any Japanese attack, bring them all to Moscow and basically refortify the entire position throughout. And as everything is refortified, when the Germans are actually able to move forward, they're undersupplied. They don't have much going for them in terms of like weather being good. They're actually able to completely stop and push. They were able to push the German army, the Wehrmacht, 200 kilometers away from Moscow as a result of all this. There's not many people here that you know.
Say hi. Wave hi.
He's not going to.
Yeah.
So they were able to push them 200 kilometers back as a result of this. And while the Germans are going to have 2 other major offensives, one in the summer of 1942 and one in the summer of 1943, both of them are going to be, well, ineffective, and they're not going to achieve their final goals. One of the immediate effects of the failure of Operation Barbarossa is that Hitler kicked the guy who was basically in charge of the army. He kicked him out of power, and he said, you know what? I got this. I'm going to run the army all by myself. I'm going to handle this. And it started a time of distrust between him and his generals. so much so that his generals would begin to try to kill him because they thought he was basically insane. And this didn't help the whole thing. Hitler had a very big complex of being like, I'm the best and nobody else is better. Very Napoleon of him. And so he begins replacing generals every time they fail from this point forward, and things don't go well as a result of that. 1942, they tried to take the oil fields in Soviet Union, and once again, Blitzkrieg worked really well, and then they got stopped within a couple months, and the weather turned poorly, and the Soviet army was able to get behind them. And by 1943, the Soviet army had grown to almost 8 million, and I think the Germans only had about, no, I'm sorry, the Soviet army grew to 3 million, and the Germans only had about 1 million left in the country at that time. And so it was basically just a matter of time. By 1944, the Germans were basically just trying to keep the Soviets in Russia as long as they possibly could, because the amount of atrocities that were committed against the Soviets while the Germans were there would basically be revisited on the German citizens that encountered the Russian army. And the amount of things, like besides like the rapes, besides the taking of possessions, they would poison wells so that the people there, whenever they would drink from the water, would be killed. It's an insane amount of civilian casualties. And if you want to see, interesting numbers, look at the amount of civilian casualties as the Germans went into the Soviet Union during Operation Barbarossa, and then look at the amount of German casualties as the Soviet Union returned the favor, if you will. It was not good. And it was very, not much else to say about that. Lots of bad humanity on display there. Not to go too far outside of our parameters, but the Japanese were actually also experiencing a lot of great success throughout their campaigns in the Pacific. They had captured tons of islands, major islands, small islands. They used the smaller ones as fortifications to stop anybody coming in to try to take over. They had made great inroads into China, which is why the Soviet Union was worried that Japan would attack them through China. And then stay inside, buddy. And then the Japanese were also on the point of capturing Australia. They had started an offensive in Australia, and it wouldn't be until the United States, around 1942, really began to be effective in the Pacific campaign and to stop them. Shut the door. Shut the door. No, you can go out the front. That way. And so, so the Japanese were very successful as well, and their war started in China in 1933. So by the time the U.S. actually begins fighting the Japanese, they have been at war for quite a while before we really got there. Now let's switch our focus to the Holocaust. And there's two things I had you look up: the Nuremberg Laws and the Wannsee Conference. The Wannsee Conference is where I'll start. It's basically just a group of individuals who are like in the second tier of German political hierarchy, if you will. And it's basically after Hitler has already signed the decrees about the Jews and everything, and after he has made up his mind about who's a Jew and who is not a Jew. Did anyone come across the term Mitschlig? It's essentially a person who, they're not directly Jewish, but they have, I think it was 2 Jewish grandparents or more. And so they're not directly Jewish, but they're partially Jewish. And so they had to determine, and this is something Hitler determined in 1935, who was going to be sent to extermination camps and who was going to be left alone. And so you had the Jews who would automatically be sent, and then you had what they call the Menschlich, and they, understandably, Hitler was not too excited about sending that group to extermination camps. Now, hopefully most of you have some sort of idea that Hitler himself has some Jewish descent in his family history. His mother was Jewish, so he really didn't want the Menschlich group to be considered Jews, because then that would make him to be considered a Jew. And so he kind of excluded that group and said, as long as they don't marry a Jew and as long as they don't practice the religion of a Jew, we're okay with that group. But if they're a Jew, like directly descendant, you will be persecuted. We'll just put it that way. And in 1935 is when the whole thing started. So the Wannsee Conference was a group of secondary political organizations in Germany, and basically just saying, all right, so we're going to follow suit. It was only a 90-minute meeting, and they doctored up the minutes. If you don't know what minutes are, they're basically just a record of what happened in a meeting, notes taken down, and they're given to everyone so that you don't forget what happened. And the minutes were doctored after the meeting, and the wording was changed so that it didn't sound so harsh. So one of the terms that was used throughout the document was evacuation to the east. So Jews would be evacuated to the east, but literally what that meant is they were going to be killed. So whenever you ever see the terms, the Jews will be evacuated to the east, 100% they're going to a camp to be killed. That's literally what it meant. And so you have all of that kind of that secondary group that are kind of agreeing to what's going to happen to the Jewish people at that point. And the Nuremberg laws is a similar idea, determining who is a Jew and what's going to happen to them. How far are we going to take this whole idea? And understand the Holocaust, while you do have the largest group being Jews, there were other groups that were also included in these concentration camps. There's one group called the Roma. You guys know who the Roma are?
Gypsies.
Yeah, it's your gypsies. A lot of Eastern Europe had gypsies, and the Germans kind of looked down upon it. And there were still some gypsies in Europe in and of itself. Think Hunchback of Notre Dame, if you will. Those gypsies usually tended to be thieves, just to be nice. They tended to steal money and possessions and everything else. And so the Roma were included, homosexuals were included, people who had a disability of any type, whether they had a mental disability, whether they had a physical deformity. Remember, eugenics is very cool at this point in history. So if you have any sort of physical problems, well, we're going to take care of that, and you're not going to procreate and share that down your family line. And so all of these people were persecuted against. And again, I believe that whole group, everyone I just mentioned, equaled somewhere in the neighborhood of like 1.5 million. So the Jews were most definitely the largest group that were persecuted against, and over 6 million of them were killed as a result of them just being Jewish. And this is kind of that idea of this anti-Semitism. What started off as just like a popular kids club in Germany to be anti-Semitic has grown into really this, persecuting them to the point of killing them just because of their race. And that's how far all of that unfortunately went at that point in history. And so just one of the things that's often debated, if you ever have a chance and you enjoy history, take like a World War II class in college, and it brings up a lot of interesting ideas and things you don't normally hear about. But one of the things that fascinated me is the debate of whether or not the German people, like the German military leaders, were brainwashed. Like, how culpable are they in the Holocaust? Now, we know Hitler's culpable. We know that some of the hierarchy, but the people who ran the camps, the people who were just kind of like under it all and just following orders, how culpable are they in everything that happens in the Holocaust. And it's a very interesting question of, is brainwashing a thing, or did they willingly do it? And it's kind of, it's interesting if you ever want to look into it, but there's no definitive answer for those of you that are waiting for me to answer it or anything like that. There's no definitive answer. I don't think brainwashing is scientifically proven. I think that you can train someone to do something and to not ask questions, but I think ultimately you can never take away someone's God-given like knowledge between right and wrong. No matter how much you tell them that this is the right option, like killing the Jews is the right thing because they're terrible people. You can tell them that all you want, but a person's still going to know, this is murder. And what we're doing is not exactly following cultural ideals or anything like that. So I don't think brainwashing is a thing, but you can find good evidence to the contrary out there as well. So, but yeah, there's no definitive answer. Any questions? Hey, there's Kendall.
I'm back home.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I cried, so I wanted to go home.
Oh, okay.
It had been 3 weeks.
Imagine that, Kendall crying. Did you stomp your feet too?
No, not this time.
All right. Let's see. Next time, let me throw this in the chat so that you guys are ready. And it'll be on Thursday, by the way, if you haven't figured out our schedule, Mondays and Thursdays. Ooh, the Lost Generation. That would be a cool thing to look up, but I don't think I'm going to give you that. You know what? we're just gonna let it be. We're gonna finish up the Unit 8, and we'll do Unit 9 whenever we come back. We're gonna, next time, if you want to look up something, I'm not gonna require anything, but if you want to look up something, we're gonna basically be looking up the atomic bomb and the people who were responsible for it. So Enrico Fermi. We'll be looking at physicists in general. Niels Bohr. Ooh, Heisenberg or Schrodinger? Let's go with Schrodinger. There's an umlaut above that O, by the way, for Schrodinger, but not that you would put that in whenever you type it up anyways, but just so you know.
Required.
An umlaut. It's like the two little dots right above the O. Anyways, so we're going to be looking at that, looking at the changes in science during World War II, and kind of where that's going to take us as a result, and leading us into the Cold War, which was not as cold as some people think. You guys understand why it's called a Cold War, right?
Because there weren't any actual battles.
Yeah, no large-scale battles or anything like that. It was more of a spy battle, more of a battle of words. A Cold War is considered a battle of ideologies rather than with weapons and everything else. I guess you could technically say it was with weapons. Who has the most nuclear bombs is essentially the arms race that takes place during that time period. Yeah. Still haven't figured out why you needed more bombs. Like, if I remember, trying to remember my Cold War class that I took, the Soviet Union and the United States together had enough nuclear bombs to destroy the Earth. I think it's like 20 times over. You'd think once you got to one time over, you're done. Like, why keep going? Just stop. Save your money. Put it into other things. No. I will have more bombs than you, and no one will stop me. Think of all the other things we could have developed during that time. Yeah. Led to the space race, so that'll be interesting. All right. Well, that's all I have. So if you guys don't have any questions.
Do we have like a DBQ?
Yes, AP Central. Go check it. You have a DBQ. Oh, great news. Thank you so much for saying that, Kyle. I now know exactly what's going to be on your test. A shortened DBQ. I think they said, if I remember correctly, it's 5 documents instead of 7. So that's exactly what I'm giving you from this point forward is DBQs. So that you're prepared for that. I went through all of your LEQs. I've already graded them. You guys, long essay questions should not be 1 paragraph at all, ever. And I'm going to say this again because I know I've mentioned it before. Secondly, whenever they're asking for the most important factor, give 1 thing. Some of you went religion, economy, like, that's not going to help you. You have to give 1 thing. So if you want to mention economy, you can say, the search for gold, the fur trade. Those 2 things fall under the economy, and that's perfectly fine. But some of you are all over the place. Like it was religion, it was economy, it was glory, like gold, God, and glory. Some of you tried to throw that in there quite a few times. You've got to pick 1. It's like the big crab in Moana. Pick one. Like, pick 1. That's whenever they're asking for the most significant, that means the number 1 thing, not the number 3 things. All right. So make sure you do that. Work on your number 1 thing that I couldn't give a point for was thesis. You got to have that thesis statement in there. A lot of you had the context, and a few of you had the broader historical context. So you got the last 2 points, but that thesis is all important, and you have to have the thesis. Remember, a thesis is literally stating that, I believe this happened because of this. And please don't write I believe. I'm looking at a few faces in here who wrote I believe. Don't write I believe.
It was me.
The most significant factor is not I believe. The most significant factor is, okay? So just don't do I believe. But on that note, at the same time, you're not going to have to say the most significant factor because it's a DBQ, so you're going to have to word it a different way, but still, just don't say I believe. Keep the personal side out of it as you begin to write. But yeah, so it's going to be a DBQ, shortened, 5 documents if I remember correctly. So that's what we're going to be practicing. And I assigned 1 today. It's due on Thursday. So, and I won't assign another one until after spring break. So
When is spring break?
Next week.
well, Friday.
Friday.
Starts on
Yeah.
Friday.
Oh.
Wait, so that's gonna be like the whole test now? It's just the shortened DBQ?
Shortened DBQ, that's it. You need to make sure you're working on your writing skills. Remember, a DBQ, you've got to have at least a paragraph, a good paragraph, not a 5th grade paragraph of 3 to 4 sentences, like 6 to 7 sentences per document. Bringing in outside information, doing all of that. So you're going to have to practice this. You're going to have to do this. I did put a time limit of 45 minutes on it. Please, last time, some of you emailed me. It closed on me. I didn't even do anything. It closed and it was over. And I didn't realize there was a timer. There is a timer. I'm announcing it. 45 minutes. Make sure that you pay attention to that. All right? Any other questions? You can go to AP Central and actually see if you got a 1, 2, or 3 on the LEQ. And I already put the grade for it into RenWeb. So, all right. Anything else? Yeah. For those of you that have video, it's good to see you guys.
Do we have Bible group thing?
You'll have a Zoom on Wednesday, and we'll be reviewing for your test on Thursday.
At what time is that?
Your test? The Zoom? It's 12 o'clock. It's the same time as it was last week. Like, it'll be the same time, same day, every single week. So I think it was 12 o'clock on Wednesday.
Okay.
I know, it's so early.
Okay, one day it was for Bible, I think. I actually put my alarm clock for 12 o'clock and I slept through it. I slept till 1 o'clock and I was like, well, I missed the Bible Zoom call.
I'm surprised I'm awake for this one.
Oh my goodness, guys!
I don't
it's
know what it was.
relative.
I woke up at 10:45 and I
Same,
looked at
and
my
then I
phone.
saw
Me
it was
too.
at 11, and I was like,
I
oh my
woke up
gosh.
5.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, AP Euro is every Monday and Thursday at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
So just know that that's going to happen. Wednesdays will be Bible at 12 o'clock. And I don't think I do anything on Tuesdays. So,
I'll make
And
sure to wake
spring
up at
break lasts
10:30.
Friday to Friday? Is that how that works?
huh?
The spring break lasts like from Friday to Friday?
Essentially, let's see, the 10th, 17th, 18th, 19th. You cut your next AP Euro meeting after Thursday will be the 20th, April 20th.
Okay.
Bo, you know what that means? Yes, sir. 2K.
Hey guys.
2K.
All you do is play video games.
No, never. I'm working on my DBQ skills.
Yeah,
And for the other 23 hours of
Hey,
video
I'm
games.
actually going to, because literally, if I can like pass like this test with like a
I mean,
Do we
think
get to
about
shave
it.
your head?
It's a really good opportunity if you will focus in on doing the DBQ the way that you should and getting better at it from now until the time that you take it. Like, you have a really good chance of getting a good score on this AP test, and then hey,
and then I could be done. You know.
Hey, can we still shave your head?
only if everyone passes.
You said if we get 3, right?
If everyone gets a 3,
Isn't it 2 passing? Is that what's
No.
passing? 3?
3 is passing.
So we still get to shave your head, but how are we going to shave your head if we're in quarantine?
We're
Well, hopefully by then you won't be in quarantine.
We're driving to his house.
And we didn't say
I can't
shave. We
drive.
said buzz. We said buzz. I'm not going to be Mr. Clean.
We're going to shave your head.
You're not buff enough to be Mr. Clean.
No, that's true. That is very true. But either
It'd be
way,
more-
okay, fine. I'm not going to be Lex Luthor.
Oh,
It'd
no.
be more like the dude from Breaking Bad.
Yeah, I'm not going to be Lex Luthor.
Like Vin Diesel.
Because I literally look like Lex Luthor on Smallville.
Buenos días.
Because it happened in college. Yes, it did.
Shaved your head?
Huh?
You shaved your head?
Didn't shave it again. It was really close though. Literally like a 1. So with blonde hair, basically looked like I shaved it. It was not a pleasant time. And it was hot, soccer season. Oh,
I just shaved mine.
I had to put sunscreen on top of my head.
My dad has to do that.
That was not fun. Whenever you have hair up there, though, it's just not fun. It's one thing if you have like a bald head, you know, you've shaved it all off. It's awesome. You put some up there. It's like rubbing suntan lotion on your arms or whatever, but yeah. All right. Well, it's good seeing you guys. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you later.